All right, how's everybody feeling? An amazing night, and it is such an honor, such a profound honor for me to be here to help celebrate 50 years of Public Advocates. 50 years, that's a lot of years. I want to thank the staff and the leadership and the board of Public Advocates, and to thank all of you tonight for coming and supporting this extraordinary organization. There are tons of reasons to support Public Advocates, but I wanted to lift up my top three because I think they're particularly important for this moment in our country's history. The first is that they're lawyers. I like lawyers. But they're not just any lawyers. They're the people's lawyers. And I want to share a story about why that's important to the domestic workers movement and me personally. 22 years ago, on the first floor of the Lafayette Avenue Presbyterian Church in Brooklyn, I helped organize domestic workers from different communities, from community-led grassroots organizations in the South Asian community, Filipina, Latinx, Caribbean community. Women, domestic workers started coming together and gathering to share stories and strategize ways of addressing the widespread abuses they encountered every single day. Everything from being fired for getting pregnant, stories of sexual harassment, of not being paid for weeks' worth of work, literally horrific stories of modern-day slavery, and then the daily indignities of not knowing when you could leave work to care for your own children, of constantly being paid late or being surveilled by nanny cams. It was about basic respect and recognition as workers, and really as human beings with inherent dignity. We surfaced cases involving domestic workers who were mistreated, mostly human trafficking cases, and a group of lawyers at the NYU Immigrant Rights Law Clinic, NYU grad, took up representation of the workers and helped us sue abusive employers. They answered our calls for legal support, and those cases became calls to action to establish rights and protections for the workforce who we learned had been systematically excluded from basic labor rights thanks to the anti-Black racism of Southern Dixiecrats who made sure that they wouldn't have equal protections under the New Deal labor laws. In 2003, we decided to hold our first citywide convention and brought together 250 domestic workers from around the city to share experiences and imagine what rights and protections could look like that would address the injustices they faced. The NYU Law Clinic students were part of the convention and took the ideas we generated together that day, November 3rd of 2003, and they helped us draft them into a bill we called the New York Domestic Workers Bill of Rights. For the next 6 years, we would travel to Albany during the legislative session with vans and buses full of domestic workers and supporters to do lobby visits set up by our lawyers at the clinic and later by our pro bono lawyer, Richard Winston. Thousands of workers would participate in advocating, marching, testifying, speaking truth to power. Until finally in 2010, after nearly 7 years of organizing, New York became the first state in the country to pass a domestic workers' Bill of Rights. And those workers in New York inspired workers all over the country to organize and launch campaigns, and today 10 states and 3 cities have passed domestic worker bills of rights, and just this past summer, the United States House of Representatives held its first hearing about the essential work of domestic workers and debated the merits of a national domestic workers' Bill of Rights. And all of this happened because workers organized, and workers organized because we had organizers, and our advocacy was impactful because we had the right people's lawyers, guiding us, supporting us, lawyers like the ones at Public Advocates. Today, 22 years later, we are part of a vast and growing ecosystem of organizations, workers, and families fighting for a strong care infrastructure, for childcare, paid family and medical leave, home and community-based services for all, and good jobs for all of the workers in the care economy. In the context of this ecosystem, we are more than the sum of our parts. And we fight to change policy, systems, and culture to value and support caregiving and care work in a whole new way. And every group in the ecosystem brings their skills, their expertise, and capacities to the table. That is how we grow in our impact. The problems that we are trying to solve and the systems we take on, like housing, transportation, and education, the issues and systems that Public Advocates focuses on, these are too big and complex to take on without a strong ecosystem of organizations that can support and help channel the power of the community. We need and deserve the best lawyers around to help solve these challenges. And that is who we have at Public Advocates, which brings me to the second reason to support. This organization has been around for 50 years, and they're in it for the long haul. They are in it to win it for the long haul. And that is important to me because you heard in my story that change takes time. It takes time and patience and intergenerational connection. It took 7 years to pass the first Domestic Worker Bill of Rights. It's taken 85 years for legislation to be introduced in Congress to include domestic workers in federal labor laws. Solving any big problem or addressing inequity in any complex system like education or housing takes generations of hard work. Even at NDWA, we are building upon generations of organizing among domestic workers. Domestic workers like Dorothy Lee Bolden, a Black domestic worker from Georgia who started the National Domestic Workers Union in 1968, or the Black domestic workers who went on strike in 1881, also in Georgia, to raise their pay as washerwomen. We need organizations that have the historical memory about where we have been and how we got here. And it's not just that we don't want to reinvent the wheel. It's that we, our communities, have been through so much, endured, survived, and figured out how to resist and organize in order to move closer to their dreams. And we must know that history. That is the ground that we stand on. Our organizations, like this one, are the holders of our movement memory. They hold the trust and relationships with the community that takes time to build, years like those roots. They hold the stories of failure that we had to learn to see the win. They are the product of risk and sacrifice on the part of all who came before. To sustain an organization for 1 year is a feat. 10 years is a major milestone. NDWA just celebrated our 15th anniversary this year, and it feels like several lifetimes. 50 years is truly humbling and extraordinary. Change takes time, and this organization has proven that it's here to stay and in it to win it for the long haul, which is what it will take. Which then brings me to the final point, which is about winning. People often ask me what keeps me going and how I've sustained myself in this work for 25 years. And I simply have hope. And it's not because I was born an optimist. It's the kind of hope that's grounded. It's because I have seen everyday people inspire movements of people of all walks of life to come together to do extraordinary things. Being an organizer who works with lawyers, storytellers, engineers, all kinds of people in addition to the caregivers and domestic workers in our membership, is like being at Public Advocates. We work with the community, and we're a bridge to whomever and do whatever is needed to win for the people. And we actually win big things. The domestic workers movement, our first wins were for wages owed to trafficked domestic workers. Then we went on to win policy change like the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights. We're now fighting for $400 billion in funding for home and community-based services and care for older adults and people with disabilities and the jobs that support them. We've already won $27 billion towards that goal. And these wins matter. On the issues that Public Advocates works on, it's a matter of life and death. And winning is what gives people hope, gives us the collective confidence to continue the fight, even when the odds are against us, which they usually are. Here at Public Advocates, you are winning all the time. We saw a whole video about the incredible historic wins, and just in the last few years, in the midst of a pandemic, extensions and eviction moratoria, keeping people in their homes, rent forgiveness, financial aid expansion for community college students, and so much more. We are facing the toughest political environment of my lifetime. There is a rising far right-wing movement that is taking and consolidating power from school boards to the Supreme Court. And they are coming for the foundation of our society, our democracy itself. This should be a wake-up call for us. We have to get sharper about how we do the work, more focused on building power. And we must remind ourselves, now more than ever before, that we can win. Yeah. There is no other way to keep people in the fight of our lives for the future of our democracy. We have to believe, no matter what happens, that we can win, that even in the darkness, we can channel light. In fact, that is our job. Public advocates have helped us to believe that we can win because they have actually helped us win for 50 years. We need this organization to be stronger than ever so that we can not only survive the next 50, but we can use every day of it to build the power we need to win the future we deserve. That hope is the first ingredient to a future with justice and a place of honor and belonging for everyone. Without it, nothing else is possible. There is no other path. I have just come from Montgomery, Alabama, where I had the privilege of spending 3 days with Brian Stevenson, who I understand, who I understand was an intern here. Okay, that's impressive. At the Legacy Museum and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, which if you haven't visited, I highly recommend a pilgrimage there. These landmarks, these memorials, are dedicated to helping us understand and reckon with the violence of slavery and racism in our country. And I will leave you with these words of his. Hopelessness is the enemy of justice. Hope allows us to push forward even when the truth is distorted by the people in power. It allows us to stand when they tell us to sit down and to speak when they say, be quiet. We will need to stand when they tell us to sit down and speak when they say, be quiet. And thankfully, Public Advocates is here to stand and speak with us. Thank you, and happy 50th anniversary.